Have you ever felt completely alone in a world that is not your own? Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be the last of your kind, to carry the weight of a lost civilization on your shoulders? And if you had to hide everything you were just to survive, how far would you go to find a place to call home? Kira stood in the shadows of an unfamiliar city, the night air cold and heavy around her. She was the last survivor of the Zereth, a race, once proud and powerful, now erased from existence by a merciless enemy who hunted them across galaxies. Her silver skin shimmered faintly under the dim glow of the streetlights, and her eyes reflected a depth of sorrow and strength few could understand. The streets were alive with sounds and smells that were strange yet intoxicating. The chatter of humans, the hum of engines, and the distant music spilling from open windows created a symphony of life that Kira both feared and longed to be part of. But trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Every step she took was measured cautious, aware that danger could be lurking in every shadow. Her memories were fragmented images of a world lost to time, crystal cities of light and knowledge, peaceful moments shattered by war and betrayal. Faces of friends and family long gone haunted her dreams. Yet here on Earth she sought refuge, hoping to find some semblance of peace, even if it meant living in silence and hiding her true self. One evening, while wandering the city, she stumbled upon a small park bathed in the soft light of a full moon. The air was cool, and the scent of earth and grass brought a flicker of comfort to her restless soul. She sat on a bench watching the stars twinkle overhead, feeling both isolated and strangely connected to this place so far from her home. It was there that fate brought her to Marcus, a man weathered by life, yet possessing a kindness that pierced through the walls she had built around her heart. Marcus was a former soldier who had seen too much loss and pain, but still carried a light within him that refused to be extinguished. When their paths crossed, something unspoken passed between them, a silent recognition of shared scars and unspoken hopes. Marcus noticed her immediately, the way she moved with grace, yet guarded her presence with subtle tension. He approached slowly with hands open and voice soft. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuinely concerned. Her guarded eyes met his, and for the first time in a long time she felt the faintest spark of trust. Their meeting was not the stuff of fairy tales. No grand gestures or instant connection, just two broken souls cautiously reaching out for something neither could quite name. But in that moment a fragile bond began to form, a promise that maybe together they could face the darkness that pursued them. The night deepened, and with it grew their silent companionship. As they shared stories of loss and survival, Marcus spoke of Earth, its beauty and chaos, its capacity for both destruction and healing. Kira listened, absorbing his words like a balm to her wounded spirit. But danger was never far behind. The enemies who had hunted her relentlessly were closing in, and time was running out. She knew that staying hidden was no longer enough, and that to survive she might have to fight, not just for herself, but for the fragile hope that Marcus represented. Have you ever found someone in the most unlikely place that changed the course of your life, even if only for a moment? What would you risk to hold on to that hope? Kira and Marcus stood side by side beneath the stars, two beings from different worlds bound by fate and a shared desire to find peace in a universe that seemed determined to tear them apart. Their journey was only beginning, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, yet neither was willing to walk it alone. Have you ever met someone so different from you that every interaction felt like walking on thin ice? How do you build trust when every step could be the last? The days following their chance meeting passed slowly, weighted with uncertainty and quiet curiosity. Kira, the last of her kind, remained cautious, her eyes always scanning the shadows for danger. Marcus, the battle-worn soldier, was patient and steady, sensing the fragile walls she had erected around herself. One evening, under the soft glow of Earth's moonlight filtering through a cracked window, Marcus invited Kira onto his small ship. The room was cramped, filled with the hum of ancient engines and the scent of old leather and machine oil. He motioned to a corner where he had set a small basin and towels. "You need to clean up," he said softly. "You can't hide from the past if you carry its dirt on you." Kira hesitated, then nodded slowly. For the first time, she allowed herself to be cared for, the barrier between them thinning imperceptibly. As she washed, the cool water against her silver skin brought memories flooding back. Echoes of a home lost, the warmth of family she would never see again. She struggled to hold back tears, but Marcus's quiet presence was a balm, offering silent comfort without demand. They spoke little that night, but their shared silence was heavy with meaning. Words were inadequate to bridge the vast gulf between their worlds, yet a deeper connection began to weave itself between their souls. Days turned into weeks. Kira learned to trust in small ways, sharing meals, exchanging stories of survival, and allowing Marcus to see her smile on rare occasions. Marcus, too, revealed his scars, both physical and emotional, the battles he had fought and the loved ones he had lost. Together, they navigated the complexities of two very different lives entwined by fate. Kira's guarded demeanor softened slowly, replaced by cautious hope. Marcus's steady kindness offered a lifeline in a universe that often seemed cold and unforgiving. Have you ever let someone into your life so slowly that the change almost went unnoticed, until one day you realized you could no longer imagine being without them? Their fragile bond was tested repeatedly, through moments of fear, misunderstanding, and the looming threat that hunted Kira relentlessly. Yet each challenge only deepened their reliance on one another. One night, as they stood side by side watching the stars from the ship's observation deck, Marcus turned to Kira and asked gently, "Do you believe it's possible to find home in someone else?" Kira's eyes reflected the distant galaxies as she whispered back, "I am beginning to." The journey toward trust was far from complete, but in the quiet spaces between battles and whispered fears, a new kind of hope had taken root, one that neither of them could deny. Have you ever experienced a moment so profound that words no longer seem enough to describe it? What if the very essence of your being could be seen and felt by another, raw, unfiltered, and true? The chamber was dimly lit by glowing crystals suspended from the ceiling, casting soft pools of light on the marble floor. Within its sacred walls, Kira and Marcus stood face to face, joined by the three Atorian princesses who watched silently from the shadows, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Tonight was the night of the Ritual of Souls, a sacred tradition meant to bind not just bodies but hearts and minds, forging a connection so deep that the barriers between beings dissolve. The priestess began her chant, ancient words flowing like a river of sound, vibrating through the chamber and resonating within every fiber of their beings. As the ritual unfolded, Kira felt an overwhelming sensation, as if unseen threads were weaving her consciousness together with Marcus's, blending memories, emotions, and fears. She glimpsed his past, the battles he had fought, the losses he had endured, the moments of quiet bravery that no one saw. She felt his pain, his hopes, and the loneliness that shadowed his steps. Marcus, in turn, was flooded with visions of Kira's world, a distant place of shimmering cities and endless skies now lost to darkness. He sensed her strength, her sorrow, and the fierce determination that had driven her to seek refuge here. The three princesses watched as the connection deepened, their skepticism giving way to empathy. They too felt the undeniable pull of shared vulnerability and the fragile threads of trust beginning to form. For minutes that stretched like hours, they remained entwined in this sacred communion, hearts beating in silent harmony. When the ritual finally ended, silence enveloped the chamber, a silence thick with newfound understanding and unspoken promises. Have you ever had a moment when you truly saw another person? Not just their face, but their soul. How did that change your relationship? Kira opened her eyes slowly, meeting Marcus's gaze with a mixture of vulnerability and hope. The princesses stepped forward, their expressions softened, the weight of pride and prejudice lifting just enough to allow warmth to seep in. This night marked a turning point. A bridge between worlds built not on politics or obligation, but on the profound power of connection. As the stars outside shimmered gently in the night sky, Kira and Marcus stood together, ready to face the challenges ahead, united not only by alliance but by something deeper and far more enduring. Have you ever learned something powerful not through words but through shared moments and quiet understanding? How much can two very different beings teach each other when they truly listen? The days after the ritual of souls were unlike any Kira had ever known. The tension that once gripped the royal palace softened, replaced by a delicate curiosity and a growing openness between her and Marcus. They moved through the halls not as strangers bound by fate, but as companions discovering each other's worlds. One morning, Kira found Marcus in the palace garden, a sprawling sanctuary filled with vibrant alien flora and serene pools reflecting the soft light of twin suns. He was seated quietly on a stone bench, studying a small book filled with stories from Earth. She approached silently, watching the gentle way his fingers traced the words. His face was relaxed, a calmness she rarely saw in those moments of stillness. "Stories," Marcus said, glancing up with a soft smile. "They are how we make sense of the chaos, how we find meaning in the endless struggle." Kira nodded thoughtfully. "On my world, stories were sacred. They carried history, lessons, and the hopes of generations." Marcus closed the book gently. "Tell me about your favorite story." She hesitated, then spoke of a tale of light and shadow, of resilience in the face of destruction, of love that transcended loss. Marcus listened intently, captivated not just by the words but by the emotion behind them. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Princess Serena, who carried a small tray with cups of fragrant tea, an Earth custom she had begun to appreciate. She offered a cup to Kira, then to Marcus, her eyes reflecting a quiet approval. "Tea is simple," Serena said softly, "but it teaches patience and presence. Sometimes the smallest things hold the greatest meaning." Kira sipped carefully, feeling the warmth spread through her, a stark contrast to the cold loneliness she often carried. Over the coming days, Marcus and Kira shared countless moments like this. He taught her about Earth's quiet wonders, the changing seasons, the songs of birds, the feel of rain against skin. She showed him the intricate dances and customs of Atoria, the spiritual connection her people held with the stars and nature. In the process, they discovered that communication was far more than words. It was gestures, shared silences, and the slow building of trust. Have you ever experienced understanding that transcended language? What did it teach you about connection? Princess Alara observed these changes with a cautious eye. Her pride remained strong, but even she could not deny the subtle shift in Kira's demeanor, a softness born from genuine acceptance. One evening, Alara approached Marcus privately in the palace library. "Your presence has changed her," she said quietly. "She carries hope now, something I feared lost forever." Marcus regarded her solemnly. Hope is the beginning of all strength. With it, even the impossible becomes possible. Alara considered his words deeply. Perhaps there is more to this alliance than I first believed. As twilight descended, the palace was filled with a quiet energy, an unspoken promise that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Kira and Marcus stood side by side once more, their bond strengthened not by force, but by the lessons learned in shared moments and heartfelt understanding. Have you ever found that the deepest connections often grow not in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments between? The shared silences, the simple acts of kindness, the unspoken understanding that builds trust slowly over time. The days passed gently on Atoria, the rhythm of life steady yet alive with subtle changes. Kira and Marcus found themselves drawn closer, not by force or urgency, but by the slow weaving of moments both ordinary and profound. One evening, beneath the soft glow of the palace's hanging crystals, Marcus prepared a modest meal. It was simple, earthly food unfamiliar to Kira, yet offered with a warmth that transcended the flavors. She accepted it cautiously, the gesture speaking volumes more than words ever could. They sat together in a quiet corner, the bustle of the palace fading away. Kira found herself watching Marcus, the way his eyes softened when he spoke of home, the way he listened not just with ears, but with his whole being. In return, Marcus noticed the small things about Kira, the subtle tilt of her head when lost in thought, the way her hands moved gently when she spoke of her lost world, the quiet strength in her gaze. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. Stories of loss, hope, dreams long buried, and fears hidden beneath layers of courage were shared slowly, carefully. They found comfort in each other's presence, a sanctuary amidst the uncertainty surrounding them. One afternoon, Serena approached quietly, her eyes bright with newfound respect. She spoke softly about how she had seen Kira's defenses lower, how trust was blossoming where once there was only suspicion. Alara, still proud and reserved, observed from a distance, her heart wrestling between loyalty to tradition and the undeniable truth of change. Have you ever watched someone you doubted become someone you deeply respected? How did that shift affect your own beliefs? Kira and Marcus began to understand that survival was no longer about mere endurance, but about connection. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts, each teaching and strengthening the other in ways neither had anticipated. One night, as the twin moons bathed the palace in silver light, Marcus spoke quietly. "We're building something here, Kira. Not just an alliance, but a future. One step at a time." Kira smiled softly, hope flickering in her eyes. "A future I never dared to imagine." They stood together, hand in hand, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, not as strangers bound by duty, but as partners united by choice. Have you ever felt the relentless pull of a past you tried desperately to escape? What would you do if every step forward was shadowed by threats from an old enemy, a danger that refuses to let you rest? How far would you go to protect not only yourself, but the fragile hope you found in another? The calm that Kira and Marcus had built together was fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a cliff. Beneath the quiet moments and whispered promises lurked a storm gathering force, a threat that neither could ignore. Kira sat alone in their quarters, the faint hum of the city outside barely reaching her ears. Her silver skin reflected the pale glow of the room's soft lighting, but her eyes were dark pools of worry and determination. She traced the intricate patterns tattooed on her arm, ancient symbols of her lost civilization, and thought of the relentless hunters who had destroyed her world. They were coming for her here too. Marcus entered quietly, sensing the weight of her silence. He moved to sit beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "They've found us," she said softly, barely a whisper. "I thought I was safe, but they never stopped hunting." Marcus reached out, taking her hand gently. "You're not alone anymore. We face this together." Their words were simple, but beneath them lay a profound promise, one forged not just by love, but by survival itself. The days that followed were a flurry of preparation and tension. Marcus coordinated with trusted allies, gathering supplies and mapping escape routes. Kira used her unique abilities to detect the faintest disturbances, sensing danger before it arrived. Together, they fortified their sanctuary, aware that the coming battle might not just threaten their lives, but the future they dared to dream of. Every moment was laced with urgency, yet within the chaos, their bond grew stronger. In stolen quiet, Marcus taught Kira to trust not just her instincts but the strength found in partnership. She, in turn, showed him how to see beyond the battlefield, to glimpse the fragile beauty worth fighting for. One evening, as the twin moons cast a pale light across their refuge, Marcus and Kira sat side by side, the silence between them deep but comforting. He broke it softly. "You've carried so much alone for so long. Let me share the burden." Kira looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, but found only unwavering commitment. "Together," she said, "always." The night was punctuated by distant echoes, the advance of their enemies drawing near. Their sanctuary was no longer safe. Marcus stood, checking the weapons they had prepared and the escape plans laid out. "We fight not because we want to, but because we must. For every moment we protect, we buy a chance at tomorrow." Kira nodded, steeling herself for the coming storm. "I will not run, not anymore." Their shared resolve was a shield against the fear threatening to overwhelm them. Have you ever stood on the edge of uncertainty, knowing that the only way forward is through courage and unity? Who stood with you when the darkness came? As the first glimmers of dawn touched the horizon, the silence shattered with the roar of engines and the distant cry of war machines. The final confrontation was at hand. Kira and Marcus moved as one, hearts beating in sync, ready to face the shadows of the past and fight for the promise of a new dawn. Have you ever faced a moment when everything you once knew falls away and you stand at the edge of something entirely new? What does it take to rebuild, not just your life, but your very sense of hope and belonging? The battle had ended. The dust settled over a battlefield, scattered with echoes of conflict and survival. Kira and Marcus stood side by side amidst the remnants of what once threatened to tear them apart. The enemy was driven back, the immediate danger past, but the cost had been high, and the journey was far from over. In the quiet aftermath, the two found solace not in words, but in presence. The steady heartbeat beside them, the reassuring breath in the still night air. They were no longer just survivors. They were partners united by the trials they had endured and the fragile hope they now nurtured. Marcus looked out over the horizon, where the first light of dawn painted the sky with hues of amber and rose. "This is not the end," he said quietly. "It's a beginning, a chance to build something lasting." Kira nodded, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the awakening day. A future where we are not defined by the past, but by the choices we make now. Their shared resolve was a quiet defiance against the shadows that had chased her across galaxies. Together they would create a sanctuary, a home built not on fear but on trust, understanding, and love. The royal palace welcomed them back not as strangers bound by duty, but as symbols of a new era, a union that bridged worlds and hearts. The once distant princesses now walked beside Sterling, not in cold formality, but with genuine warmth and respect. Alara, once proud and distant, had softened, her sharp gaze now tempered with admiration. Serena's cautious skepticism had given way to open curiosity and quiet smiles. Lyria's youthful uncertainty was replaced by a quiet confidence, a promise of hope carried forward. Their alliance was no longer a fragile treaty, but a living bond, strengthened by shared struggles and bound by genuine connection. At the celebration that followed, laughter mingled with music, and the halls echoed with stories of courage and unity. Sterling and Kira shared a quiet moment away from the crowd, their hands gently intertwined. "Do you think we can truly change the course of history?" Kira asked softly. Marcus smiled, his eyes warm and steady. "Not alone, but together, yes." Have you ever found strength in unity, realizing that together you can face any challenge? How has connection changed your life? As the stars emerged one by one in the deepening sky, Sterling and Kira stood together, looking toward the future, uncertain but filled with promise. Their story was no longer just about survival. It was about hope, about love that defied the stars, and about the power to rebuild and renew. Have you ever stood at the crossroads of endings and beginnings, feeling the weight of what was lost, but also the thrill of what might come? What does it truly mean to build a future when the past still whispers in every quiet moment? The morning sun stretched its warm fingers over the horizon, bathing the city of Vittoria in soft light that glimmered like a promise. The palace gardens were alive with gentle colors and the delicate scent of alien blossoms, a world reborn from the trials that had shaped it. Kira and Marcus stood quietly beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient tree, its leaves whispering softly in the breeze. Around them, the once tense and guarded royal family now gathered in quiet celebration, not merely of victory, but of hope reborn. Marcus looked into Kira's eyes, the deep pools reflecting the calm certainty that had grown between them. "We have faced darkness and survived, but the future, our future, is ours to shape." Kira smiled softly, the burden of her past no longer a shadow, but a part of the strength she now carried. "And it is a future we face together, hand in hand." The princesses joined them, each embodying the strength, grace, and newfound openness that had blossomed through their shared journey. Alara, once the embodiment of pride and distance, now stood with quiet humility and fierce loyalty. Serena's thoughtful gaze held a spark of optimism. Lyria's youthful spirit was no longer uncertain but steady and bright. The alliance between their worlds was no longer a fragile treaty written in fear. It was a living bond, forged in struggle, trust, and love. A gentle hush fell over the gathering as King Alaric stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of history and hope. "Today, we stand united, not just as rulers and subjects, but as family. Let this dawn mark the beginning of an era where understanding and compassion triumph over fear and division." Marcus took Kira's hand firmly, lifting it in a silent vow before those assembled. "To love, to hope, and to the future we build together." Kira's voice was steady, filled with quiet strength. "We carry our pasts not as chains but as lessons, guiding us toward a tomorrow brighter than any star in the sky." Have you ever made a promise that changed your life? How did it shape the path you walked afterward? The crowd erupted softly in applause, laughter, and joyous voices weaving through the palace halls. Sterling and Kira shared a look, one of unspoken gratitude and quiet joy for the journey they had traveled and the road still ahead. As twilight descended once more, the city shimmered beneath the stars, symbols of infinite possibility and hope. Kira and Marcus stood side by side, gazing upward, knowing that no matter what challenges awaited, they would face them together. And so, beneath a new dawn, their story, one of survival, love, and unity, began anew.